You walked into my tower.
You walked into my world with careful hands and a quiet smile. I almost believed it.
You were never supposed to have a face.
What?
The people who sent me knew exactly what they were doing, and they handed me a reason I could not say no to. And they never once—
Tell me something and think very carefully before you open your mouth. Lee Hyun-soo's voice was barely above a whisper, which somehow made it worse. He stood at the far end of the room, his platinum blonde hair catching the cold light above him, the black and grey phoenix tattoo climbing up the right side of his neck like it was alive. His hands were clasped behind his back. He did not raise them. He did not need to. The 6 men positioned around the room were his hands. The accounts. Someone has been moving through them like a ghost. Clean. No fingerprints. No trail. He tilted his head. Except I found one. Zara did not flinch. She was seated in a steel chair in the middle of a warehouse in Mapogu at 2 a.m. Her wrists zip-tied in front of her. A smear of blood on her left cheekbone from where one of his men had hit her when they grabbed her off the street. She looked at him with steady eyes and said nothing. "You have 30 seconds, Hyun-soo said. Before what?" she asked. The air shifted. Park Jin-woo stepped out of the shadow to her right. And even in that moment, even zip-tied and bleeding, something in Zara's chest pulled in 2 directions at once. Jin-woo was broader, darker. The red and black dragon tattoo visible along the left side of his neck. His charcoal suit jacket hanging open, sleeves pushed up to the forearm. He crouched down in front of her so his eyes were level with hers, and he searched her face like he was looking for something he already knew he would not find. "I told you she wasn't just a waitress," he said quietly, not to her, to Hyun-soo. "You told me you liked her smile," Hyun-soo replied. "I told you both things." Zara looked between them. 2 of the most dangerous men in Seoul, crouched and standing over her in a cold warehouse, and somehow the thing that broke through her composure first was not the fear. It was the grief on Jin-woo's face. The way he was looking at her like she had taken something from him, that he hadn't even fully realized he was holding. "Zara," Jin-woo said softly. Just her name, like a question, like a verdict. She closed her eyes. She thought about her mother, about the hospital bed in Accra, about the sound of the phone call 3 months ago when the doctor said the words terminal and expensive in the same breath, about the number she'd been given, a sole contact, an anonymous job, 2 targets, clean in and out. No one gets hurt, just money moving from where it is to where it needs to be. She thought about how neither of these men were supposed to have faces. They were supposed to be names on a file, accounts on a screen. They were not supposed to come into the restaurant where she worked and order the same table 3 times a week. "You have 20 seconds, Hyun-soo said. "Then you should probably decide what you're going to do with me," Zara said, opening her eyes. "Because I am not going to explain myself to either of you while my hands are tied behind, my back like a criminal." "Your hands are tied in front," Jin-woo said. "You know what I meant." Silence stretched across the warehouse like a held breath. And then, impossibly, Jin-woo laughed. It was short and incredulous, and he shook his head and looked at the floor, and Hyun-soo stared at him like he had lost his mind. "Cut it," Jin-woo said to the man nearest Zara. "Jin-woo, cut it, Hyun-soo. She's not going anywhere." He was right. She was not going anywhere. Not because of the 6 men, but because she owed them both the truth and she knew it. And the weight of that knowledge had been pressing against her sternum for 8 weeks, and she was so tired of holding it. The zip tie snapped. Zara brought her hands to her lap and rubbed her wrists, and looked at both of them and said, "My mother is dying. I needed the money. Someone gave me your names and told me you'd never notice. That is the whole story." No one spoke. Then Hyun-soo said, "Who gave you our names?" And that was the question that changed everything. Wherever you are watching this, drop your city in the comments right now. Because this story about a woman who only meant to survive and ended up tangled between 2 men she never planned to feel anything for is already reaching further than she ever ran. And if this found you tonight, at whatever hour it is where you are, at whatever point in your own life where you are just trying to make it from one day to the next, then you already know why you need to see what happens next. subscribe, because we are just getting started. And now, let's go back to where it all began. 3 months earlier, Seoul was raining. Zara had learned quickly that Seoul rained differently than Accra. In Accra, the rain came down like it meant it, warm and heavy and unapologetic. The kind of rain that soaked through you and somehow felt like relief. Seoul rain was precise, cold. It fell in thin silver lines, and it did not care about you at all. She stood outside, the restaurant in Itaewon with her uniform still on, white blouse, black apron, her natural hair pinned up at the back of her neck. And she pressed her phone to her ear and listened to her mother's breathing on the other end of the line. Her mother did not speak much anymore. The treatments took the words from her before the day was half over. But she stayed on the line, and Zara stayed on the line, and the rain came down between them across 6,000 kilometers, and they just breathed together. "I'm handling it, Mommy," Zara said. "I promise I'm handling it." Her mother made a small sound. It was not agreement. It was love, the kind that does not need language. Zara hung up and stood in the rain for one more minute, and then she noticed the black car idling on the far side of the street, engine running, no one getting in or out, just sitting there with its lights off like a held breath. She filed it away without reacting to it. That was something Adaze had taught her in the first year. You never look directly at the thing that makes you nervous. You look at something else, and you see it with the side of your awareness, and then you walk away naturally, and then you run. She walked back inside the restaurant. She did not run, but her pulse was ticking faster. The restaurant, Garrick, was the kind of Itaewon establishment that sat at the intersection of beautiful and exclusive. Dark wood interiors, low amber lighting, a menu that changed with the seasons. The clientele were business people, foreigners with expense accounts, and occasionally men who arrived in black cars with tinted windows and did not look directly at the staff. Zara was good at her job. She had the kind of warm, disarming presence that made people feel comfortable spending money, and her manager, a small, sharp woman named Ms. O, had noticed within the first week that Zara's tables always tipped better than anyone else's. What Ms. O did not know was that Zara had chosen Garrick deliberately, that she had done her research before she ever set foot in Seoul, that the restaurant sat within walking distance of two of the most significant players in Seoul's underground financial network, that she had been watching and waiting, and that the black car on the street outside appeared 3 nights in a row before it finally stopped coming. And she never knew if it had been watching her or watching someone else, and the not knowing was the part that kept her sharp. She was a thief. She had been one for 4 years, since a woman in Lagos named Adaze had found her picking a lock on a storage unit for practice, and instead of turning her in, had offered her a job. Adaze ran a quiet, sophisticated operation, digital mostly, with occasional physical acquisitions. Clean, careful. Zara was a natural. She was disciplined, she was invisible, and she was never greedy, which Adaze said was the most important quality a thief could have. When the hospital called about her mother, Zara had gone to Adaze and told her she needed something big. One job. Enough to cover everything and then some. Adaze had gone quiet for a long moment, and then she had slid a folder across the table. 2 names, 2 accounts, a methodology, a contact in Seoul, who would handle the technical side. All Zara needed to do was get close, acquire the access credentials, and the money would move on its own. "These are not small men," Adaze had said. "I'm not asking for a small job," Zara had replied. She had landed in Seoul with a work visa, a resume, and a story about wanting to experience Korean culture. She had found the job at Garrick within a week. She had rented a small apartment in Mapogu, just big enough for a bed and a desk where she kept her laptop and the equipment she would need. She had been careful. She had been patient. And every night she came home and checked the locks and checked the windows and checked the encrypted line to Shin and then called her mother and listened to her breathe. And then she sat in the dark for a while before she let herself sleep. One night she came home to find the door unlocked. She was certain she had locked it. She stood in the corridor for 30 seconds with her key in her hand and her heart very controlled and still, running the calculation. She pushed the door open slowly. The apartment was empty. Nothing disturbed, nothing missing. But the chair at her desk had been moved 3 inches to the left, and she knew because she always set it back precisely, and she had a system for knowing when something had been touched. Someone had been in here. Someone had been at her desk, and they had left without taking anything, which was the part that frightened her more than if they had taken everything, because it meant they were sending a message, not gathering intelligence. It meant someone already had what they needed, and they wanted her to know it. She called Shin that night and told him what happened. He said it was probably nothing. She told him nothing was never nothing. He went quiet for a moment, and then he said, "Keep moving. We're 60% there." She hung up and slept with a knife under her pillow, and did not tell herself she was scared because she could not afford to be scared and still do what she needed to do. And then one Tuesday evening, 3 weeks into her new life, Lee Hyun-soo walked into the restaurant and everything became considerably more complicated. She did not know who he was when he first sat down. She only knew that he was the most striking man she had ever seen in person. Tall, platinum blonde, in a way that looked like a choice and not an accident. Wearing an all-black suit with his collar open, the faint lines of a phoenix tattoo visible along the right side of his neck. He sat alone. He ordered the omakase and a glass of sancerre, and he read something on his phone while he waited, and he did not look up when she placed the first course in front of him. "Enjoy," she said. He glanced up. His eyes were light brown, almost golden. They held hers for exactly 1 second, and then returned to his phone. She walked away and did not think about it. She told herself that twice, firmly, while clearing the table next to his. He came back the following Thursday, and the Thursday after that. By the 3rd visit, he was asking for her section specifically, and by the 4th, he had learned her name. By the 4th visit, she had also confirmed who he was. Lee Hyun-soo, one of the 2 names in the folder Addis had given her in Lagos. She kept her face exactly as warm as it always was, and refilled his water, and felt the strange doubling of knowing who someone is, and being known by them at the same time. "Zara," he said at once, testing the sound of it. "That's not a Korean name." "No," she agreed, refilling his water. "Where are you from?" "Ghana." He considered this. "What brought you to Seoul?" "The rain," she said, and he almost smiled. Almost. It was the closest thing to warmth she had seen from him, and it was devastating in a way she could not afford to examine too closely. She told herself it was irrelevant. She told herself she was doing her job. Both jobs. Getting close was part of the operation. Conversation was surveillance. She told herself she felt nothing. She felt something. She told herself that was manageable. She was wrong. It was a week after Hyun-soo first walked in that Park Jin-woo appeared, and he came in like weather you didn't check the forecast for. He arrived loudly, not obnoxiously, but with presence, with energy, 3 men flanking him and a laugh already on his face about something one of them had said. He had dark black hair, slightly disheveled, broad shoulders filling out a navy suit, and the red and black dragon tattoo climbing the left side of his neck. He was handsome in the way that punched you in the chest before you had time to prepare for it, and Zara's body registered him before her mind had a chance to intervene. He saw her across the room and he stopped walking. Not for long. Just for a moment. But she noticed, and she noticed that he noticed that she noticed, and for a single ridiculous second they were just 2 people across a crowded room. Then he smiled and kept moving, and the moment passed, and she picked up a tray and went back to work. He requested her section. She had 2 VIP tables that evening, and she managed both, moving between them with the practiced ease of someone who had learned to occupy 2 realities simultaneously. And Jinwoo watched her work with the kind of focused attention that was impossible to mistake for anything casual. "You're good at this," he said when she brought the 3rd course. "Thank you. I don't mean just the food." He gestured with his wine glass at the room in general. "You read the room. You know who needs something before they ask. That's a skill." He leaned forward slightly. "Where did you learn it?" The question was precise in a way that made her pulse tick once. She smiled easily. "Experience." "What kind of experience?" "The kind that teaches you to pay attention," she said. and she picked up the empty plate from the course before and walked away before he could ask anything else. In the kitchen, she stood for 10 seconds with her back against the cold metal of the refrigerator unit and breathed through the fact that Park Jin-woo, the second name in the folder, had just looked at her like he was trying to figure out something she had not said, and she could not tell if that was his nature or if it was directed specifically at her. She decided it was his nature. She was wrong about that too. Within 2 weeks, both men were regulars. They came on different nights, never overlapping, never aware of each other at Garrick. Hyun-soo came on Tuesdays and Thursdays, quiet and magnetic, asking her questions about Ghana between courses, about what she missed, about what she liked about Seoul, about whether she was sleeping enough. That last one delivered with such straightforward concern that she had actually stopped walking for a half second before recovering. Jin-woo came on Mondays and Fridays, louder, warmer, always bringing something extra into the room. Once a small paper bag of street food from the Pojangmacha down the block, because he had decided she looked like she hadn't eaten a real meal all day. "I eat," she told him. "You eat while you're working," he said. "That doesn't count. Sit down for 5 minutes." "I can't sit down. I'm at work." "Then stand here and eat this." She ate the tteokbokki, standing at the edge of his table, and he watched her with his chin in his hand and the red and black dragon visible above his collar, and he said, "What are you really doing in Seoul, Zara?" Her heart did a single clean drop. "I told you. I wanted a change. People don't come to Seoul for a change. They come for a reason." His eyes were steady on hers, not threatening, just direct. The kind of directness that doesn't leave you anywhere to hide, because it isn't trying to corner you. It's just telling the truth and expecting the same. She handed him back the empty container. "Maybe my reason is my own business." He tilted his head. Fair enough. But the way he said it told her he hadn't dropped it. He had just set it down for now. And that was somehow worse. Meanwhile, in the small apartment in Mapagu, the operation was moving. The contact Adiz had connected her with was a man she only knew as Shin. A voice on an encrypted line, technical and efficient, and entirely without warmth. The kind of person who dealt in numbers and access codes, and never once asked how you were. He had already mapped the digital infrastructure of both targets. What he needed was physical proximity, someone who could get close enough to place a device or acquire a password or simply be in the right room at the right time. Zara was that person. She had managed to install a small skimming device on Hyun-soo's phone during the second week when he had left it on the table to take a call outside. The device was no bigger than a fingernail, and she placed it in under 3 seconds while refilling his water. And she had walked away with completely steady hands and had not looked back. The data it captured gave Shin enough to begin working. Acquiring Jin-woo's credentials had been more complicated, because Jin-woo was harder to predict and less habitual than Hyun-soo. He did not leave his phone unattended. He changed his patterns constantly. Different arrival times, different cars, sometimes arriving alone and sometimes with his men. She had observed this for 2 weeks before she identified the one consistent vulnerability. He always, without fail, removed his suit jacket when the restaurant grew warm, and he always draped it over the back of his chair, and he always kept his keycard in the inside left pocket. The night she lifted it, she was so close to him. Her shoulder brushed his when she leaned across to clear a plate, and he looked up at her with those direct dark eyes and said, "You smell like rain." "It's raining outside," she said. "You were outside?" 5 minutes ago." He looked at her for a moment longer than the exchange required, and she smiled and moved away with the plate and the keycard palmed in her right hand. And she did not breathe fully until she was in the back corridor. Shin cloned it and extracted what he needed within hours, and she replaced it the same evening via a different maneuver that she was not proud of, but that worked. And by the end of that week, the operation was at 40%. She called her mother that night, and her mother's voice sounded slightly stronger than the week before. The preliminary medication was working, the doctors had said, buying time if not solving the problem. And Zara sat on her apartment floor with her back against the bed and listened to her mother talk about the neighbors, and the church and the small complaints of daily life that were the most beautiful sounds Zara had ever heard, because they meant her mother was still here, still present, still filling up the air around her. Are you eating? Her mother asked. Yes. Are you sleeping? Yes. Are you happy? Zara paused for exactly 1 second too long, and her mother, who had known her for 29 years, caught it instantly. Who is he? Her mother said. Nobody, Zara said. Zara. There is nobody, Mommy. Go to sleep. Her mother made a sound that communicated complete and total disbelief in a single syllable, and Zara hung up and sat in the dark and thought about gold brown eyes, and dark eyes, and the impossible inconvenience of feeling things you have no room to feel. The operation was at 55% when Hyun-soo stayed until closing. It was a Tuesday, and the last customers had filtered out by 11, and Ms. Oh had disappeared into the office, and the junior staff were cleaning up. Around him, and Zara noticed he was still at his table with a second glass of wine, looking out the window at the wet street outside, and there was something in the set of his shoulders, a heaviness, barely perceptible, the kind that only showed when a man like him thought no one was watching, that she recognized. She knew what it looked like to hold something enormous alone. She approached him. We're closed, she said. I know. He did not look at her. My driver is 10 minutes away. I'll wait outside if you need me to. She should have said yes. She said, It's raining. I'm aware. She sat down across from him. She didn't plan to. Her body simply did it, as though it had made a decision before her mind caught up, and she was sitting across from Lee Hyun-soo in an empty restaurant at 11 o'clock at night, and the amber light was making the phoenix tattoo on his neck look like it was moving, and she was acutely aware that this was a complication she was creating for herself, with both hands. You seem tired, he said, finally looking at her. Long day. You always say that. I always mean it. He looked at her for a long moment. There was a quality to his attention that she had come to understand over weeks. He did not look at people the way most people did, casually and peripherally. He looked the way you looked when you were building a complete picture, piece by piece, patient and methodical. He made her feel visible in a way that was both what she had always wanted and the most dangerous thing that could happen to her right now. Is there something you're working towards, he said quietly, something that keeps you running at this pace? The question landed somewhere deep. She looked at the table. My mother is sick. I'm trying to help her. The silence that followed was not uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that meant something was being understood between two people who were not saying everything. That's why you came to Seoul, he said. That's why I work, she said carefully. He nodded once, slowly, and then, in a voice stripped of its usual precision, he said, If you ever need anything, I know we are not in a category that makes this offer appropriate, but if you need something, Zara, say the word. She looked at him. He was looking at her with those gold brown eyes, completely steady, completely serious, and she thought, this is the worst thing that could have happened to me. Not because he frightens me, because he doesn't. Because he is sitting across from me in an empty restaurant offering to help me, and I am in the middle of robbing him, and I have never hated a situation more completely in my life. Thank you, she said quietly. His driver came. He left. She sat in the empty restaurant for 3 more minutes before she trusted her legs to carry her home. The operation was at 70% when Jin-woo showed up somewhere he shouldn't have been. Zara had a system for her nights. After her shift, she walked a specific route home, not the direct route, which would have been faster, but a deliberate pattern that let her see if anyone was following before she came within 2 blocks of her apartment. She had been doing this without incident for weeks. That Wednesday night, she was halfway through the route when she heard footsteps that were not trying to be subtle. She turned. Jin-woo was 20 meters behind her, hands in his pockets, his navy suit dark with rain, and he stopped walking when she stopped and looked at her with an expression that said he knew exactly how this appeared, and he was choosing not to pretend otherwise. You're following me, she said. I'm walking, he said, in the rain, in the same direction, at midnight. I was concerned. He closed the distance between them slowly, giving her time to react to each step. You left work late. It's not a good neighborhood at this hour. I know the neighborhood, she said. I live here. He stopped 2 meters from her. The rain, was coming down between them, and his dark hair was wet, and the dragon tattoo was just visible above his rain-darkened collar. "I know you do," he said. "That's how I knew which way you walk." Something cold moved through her. "How long have you known that?" He held her gaze. "Long enough to know you change your route 3 times a week. Long enough to know you always check behind you at the corner of the main road." He paused. "Long enough to know you're not just a waitress." The street was very quiet. Just the rain and the distant sound of the city. "What do you think I am?" she said, and she kept her voice completely neutral, which was one of the hardest things she had ever done. He looked at her for a long moment. And then, unexpectedly, he said, "I think you're someone who is surviving something. And I think you're doing it alone. And I think—" He stopped. He looked away briefly, at the rain-slicked street, at nothing. Then back to her. "I think you don't have to." The cold thing in her chest loosened one thread. Just one. She could not afford to let it loosen more. "Jinwoo," she said carefully, "go home." He looked at her for another moment. Then he nodded, accepting it without demanding more, and he turned and walked back the way he had come. And she stood in the rain watching him go and felt the thread loosen another fraction that she had not authorized. She went home and sat at her desk and looked at the laptop, and the operation running at 70%, and the tiny succulent Jinwoo had left on her doorstep the week before. A small paper note tucked into the soil that said, "For someone who works too hard." Jay, and she sat there for a long time in the dark. She picked up her phone. She did not call Shin. She called her mother instead, even though it was 4 in the morning in Accra, and her mother answered on the second ring because she always answered, and she listened while Zara said nothing useful at all, just talked about the rain and the city and the restaurant. And her mother listened and at the end said quietly, "Something is changing, my daughter." "Everything is the same," Zara said. "That is how you know something is changing," her mother said, "when you need to say it out loud." The operation was at 80% when it went wrong. Shin called her on a Wednesday evening, his voice stripped of its usual clinical calm, and said 2 words. "They know." She was out of her chair before he finished the sentence. "What do you mean they know?" "Not about you specifically. Not yet. But Hyunsu's people flagged an irregularity in one of the sub-accounts this morning. They think it's an internal error. But if they dig further—" "How long do we have?" 48 hours, maybe less. She paced the length of the apartment. 8 weeks of careful, patient work and her mother's account had 80% of what was needed. Enough for the first surgery, but not the ongoing treatment. 80% was not enough. It would never be enough. She pressed her fist against her mouth and thought about the hospital room and the breathing, and she said, "Can we accelerate?" "Not without increasing the risk of detection exponentially." "Then we increase it." "Zara." "Shin, my mother has 3 months. Maybe. We accelerate." A silence. Then, 24 hours. I'll push what I can, but you need to be ready to move the moment the transfer confirms. A pause. "And Zara, if it goes wrong before then, you are on your own. I cannot be connected to you." She understood what he was telling her. She had always understood that this was the deal. She packed a bag that night. Passport, laptop, cash from the suitcase lining. She set the succulent on the windowsill because she could not explain to herself why she would pack a plant when she was preparing to run for her life. But she stood at the window looking at it for long enough that the question answered itself, and then she turned away. She went into work the next morning. Disappearing abruptly would look suspicious, and she needed one more day of looking like nothing. She served her tables and smiled her warm smile, and carried plates and refilled water glasses, and did not think about the 2 men who came to this restaurant and had somehow, against every operational principle she had ever learned, become people she cared whether she ever saw again. Jinwoo came in that Friday. He was not supposed to be there. He came Fridays, but she had not expected today. When she saw him walk through the door, something in her went very still. He looked different. The easy energy he always carried was pulled tight over something heavier, and he moved through the restaurant without his usual unhurried confidence. He sat at his usual table and looked at her when she approached, and she could see it in his eyes before he said a word. He knew something. Not everything. But something had shifted, and he had come here specifically because of it. "Sit down," he said. "Jin-woo, please." Just that word. Stripped of everything except the fact that he meant it. She sat. He put his phone on the table between them, face up. On the screen was a photograph, grainy, clearly from security footage, of a woman with natural hair and a white blouse leaning across a table in this restaurant. It was her. Anyone who knew her face would see her immediately. Her heart rate did not change. She had trained herself for this moment for 4 years. "What is this?" "My security team flagged unusual activity in my accounts this week," he said. His voice was very gentle, which was somehow worse than anger would have been. "The trail leads here, to someone who works here." He tapped the phone once, and his jaw was tight, and his eyes were the most honest things she had ever seen in a human face. "Tell me I'm wrong." She looked at the photo. She looked at him. He was watching her with those dark eyes, and he was not threatening her. He was not performing power. He was sitting across from her the same way he always sat, open, present, direct, and he was giving her every opportunity to explain, and the thing that was cracking in her chest was not her composure, but something deeper, something she had been building walls around for 8 weeks, and it was cracking, and she could feel every fracture. She opened her mouth. Her phone buzzed on the table between them. Shin's number, which meant one of two things. The transfer had confirmed, or something had gone critically wrong. She grabbed the phone. A single message. "Transfer complete. Move now. They found the access trail. Move now." Her body made the decision before her mind caught up. She was standing. "Zara." Jin-woo was on his feet too. "I'm sorry." She looked at him and she meant it with every cell in her body. "Jin-woo, I am so sorry." She walked out of the restaurant and she was 2 blocks away, moving fast, when the black car pulled alongside her and the window came down, and a voice she did not recognize said, "Get in, Mrs. Zara. Mr. Lee would like a word." She ran. She was fast. 4 years of moving through cities at night had built the kind of speed that came from knowing exactly how much your life depended on it. She cut through an alley and hit the wall at the end at a run, and went up and over it in one motion, and landed on the other side in a crouch and kept moving. She could hear footsteps. 2 sets, maybe 3, and they were coordinated, which meant they had done this before, which meant she needed to change direction. She cut left and then immediately right through a narrow passage between 2 buildings that opened into a market street still lit and peopled, and she slowed to a walk immediately, because running in a crowd makes you the most visible thing in the room. She kept her pace even, and her head forward, and her hands loose at her sides, moving through the market stalls like someone who was simply going somewhere, which she was. She made it 4 more blocks before they found her again, 2 of them this time, stepping out of separate doorways with the synchronized calm of professionals, and she understood then that running was finished. She stopped. She assessed. There was nowhere left that was faster than a radio. The hand that closed around her arm was firm and efficient, and entirely without cruelty. They took her to the warehouse in Mapo-gu, and they sat her in the steel chair, and someone hit her once across the cheek when she tried to stand. And then Lee Hyun-soo walked out of the dark with his platinum hair and his terrifyingly quiet voice, and Park Jin-woo stepped out beside him. And both men looked at her like she had reached into something they had not known they were protecting until it was gone. When she finished telling them the truth, the mother, the hospital, a daze, the folder in Lagos, the 80%. The warehouse was so quiet she could hear the rain, beginning again outside. Jin-woo stood up from his crouch. He walked to the far wall and pressed both palms flat against it, and stood there with his back to both of them, the breadth of his shoulders rising and falling as he controlled his breathing. She watched his hands against the wall, the dragon's claws visible across his left hand, and she understood that he was not containing anger. He was containing something that was not anger at all, something closer to the feeling of reaching for something and finding air. Hyun-soo had not moved. He stood very still the way he always stood, and he looked at Zara with those gold brown eyes, and he said, Adaze. You know that name, Zara said. Yes. He looked at Jinwoo's back. Jinwoo. Jinwoo turned. His jaw was rigid. I heard. This was not a random job. Hyunsoo's voice was precise and cold, and directed at Zara, but was really a transmission between two men who had been operating together long enough to communicate in frequencies that did not require words. You were specifically chosen, specifically positioned. Someone mapped our patterns and found the most effective access point, and handed you a reason that was impossible to say no to. He paused. Adaze works for the Yoon network. Zara felt the floor tilt. The Yoon. 3 years, Jinwoo said from across the room, his voice rough and controlled. They have been working to dismantle us for 3 years. Using people. Finding desperate people and handing them a story and pointing them at us. He finally moved, crossing the room toward her with that powerful, deliberate stride, and he crouched in front of her again, and he looked at her face, and this time what was in his eyes was not grief. It was fury, not at her. The distinction was absolutely clear. You were never the weapon, Zara. You were the delivery system. The money, she said. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. The money that transferred is being traced, Hyunsoo said. The accounts it was directed to are Yoon network laundering channels, not medical funds. She heard the words. She processed each one. And then, my mother's account. We blocked the transfer before it finalized. He said it carefully, watching her. Your mother has not received anything. The sound she made was involuntary and small, and she swallowed it immediately and pressed the back of her hand against her mouth, and looked at the floor, and breathed. 1 breath, 2, 3, and she held herself together with every tool 4 years had given her, and then one more she had not known she had until this moment, which was simply refusing to fall apart in a warehouse in Mapo-gu, when her mother still needed her to be standing. Jinwoo put his hand on her arm, warm and careful and completely certain, like he had made a decision about this, and the decision was not up for debate. Hey, he said quietly, look at me. She looked at him. We fix this, he said, all of it, not because you earned it, because it's right. She shook her head. I stole from you. You tried to save your mother, he said flatly. That is what happened. Everything else is someone else's crime. She's coming, Hyunsoo said, and the energy in the room shifted like a key change. He had his phone in his hand. Adaze landed in Seoul 2 hours ago. Yongsan, our people have eyes on her. He looked at both of them. She knows the transfer was interrupted. She will move to clean up before dawn. Clean up, Zara said. Every loose end, Hyunsoo said. He held her gaze and made sure she understood what he meant. She understood. She was the loosest end in this entire operation. She stood up. She rolled her shoulders. The fear was real. It sat in her chest like a weight with edges. But underneath it was something that had been building for 4 years, and it knew how to work alongside fear without being stopped by it. She looked at both men, one standing with his golden eyes, and his controlled fury and the phoenix tattoo visible above his open collar, the other watching her with his hand still on her arm, and the dragon inked from his hand to his neck. And she said, Tell me what you need from me. Jinwoo made a sound that was almost a protest. She's going to come for me regardless, Zara said, whether I'm useful or not, so I might as well be useful. Hyunsoo looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, We need you to answer your phone when she calls. They moved to a building in Gangnam that belonged to Hyunsoo, all dark glass and clean architecture, and the particular silence of spaces that money builds to keep the outside world exactly that. Zara sat in the back office with Jinwoo across the table and Byung-cheol and Tae-yang positioned at the door and a phone on the table between them. And Hyunsoo stood at the floor-to-ceiling window looking at Seoul's lights burning in the rain below, and they waited. The call came at 4:14 in the morning. Zara looked at Jinwoo. He nodded once. She answered, Adaze. Zara. The voice was exactly as she remembered, warm, controlled, the voice of a woman who had made an art of managing people. "There's been a complication." "I know," Zara said. "They found out." "Then you need to leave Seoul tonight. I'll have someone meet you. I'm not leaving." A pause, precise and loaded. "Excuse me?" "I said I'm not leaving." Across the table, Jinwoo was very still, watching her with his jaw tight. At the window, Hyun-soo had turned, his full attention on her now. "You gave me a job that was designed to put me in front of two men who know your name. You found me because my mother is dying, and that made me easy to aim. You pointed me at a target and didn't tell me what I was really walking into." She kept her voice level. It cost her something. "I want to understand what I was actually carrying before I do one more thing you tell me." Adiz's warmth shifted, not disappearing, but rearranging itself into something cooler, something that had stopped pretending. "You were a courier, Zara, nothing more. You don't need to understand anything beyond." "The money was never going to my mother," Zara said. Silence. "Was it?" Zara said again. "Your mother will be taken care of," Adiz said. "You have my word." "You have 6 hours," Zara said, and she ended the call. The room held its breath for exactly 2 seconds. Then Hyun-soo crossed to the table, looked at the trace his people had run in real time, and said, "14th floor, Yongsan Tower. She's got 2 with her." He looked up. "She'll move in 90 minutes once she decides the call was a trap." "Was it a trap?" Zara asked. "It was a confirmation," he said. "Now we know where she is." He looked at Jinwoo. "We go now." Jinwoo was already standing. They moved at 4:45 in the morning, 3 cars running dark and fast through the wet Seoul streets, the city still mostly asleep except for the convenience stores, glowing white on every corner, and the night buses moving through the rain. Zara was in the second car between Jinwoo and the window, and she watched the city move past and thought about how she had arrived here 3 months ago, looking at these same streets as logistics, distance between points, sightlines, exit routes, and somewhere along the way they had become something she actually saw. "You should have let me take you somewhere safe," Jinwoo said quietly beside her. "There isn't anywhere safe," she said. "I could have made one." She looked at him. He was looking at the street ahead, his profile set and serious, the dragon tattoo dark against his neck. "Jinwoo," she said softly. "Don't tell me you don't need protecting," he said. "I know you don't need it. I'm not saying you do. I'm saying I would have done it anyway because—" He stopped, exhaled. "Because this is what it feels like. Whatever this is. For me. This is what it feels like." The car was moving through a tunnel, momentarily dark, and in the dark she reached across and put her hand over his, and neither of them spoke for the length of the tunnel. And then the city came back around them, lights and rain, and she removed her hand before anyone could see. The hotel in Yongsan was a tower of glass and steel, the lobby lit with the particular brightness of spaces that never sleep. Hyun-soo's people had already positioned at 3 entry points. The plan was clean. Move to the 14th floor, contain Adize before she had time to destroy anything, extract information, and be gone before the hotel's own security had cause to intervene. The elevator opened on the 14th floor, and the man at the end of the corridor was already reaching before any of them had taken 2 steps. Everything happened at the same time. Byung-cheol moved, fast and low, an absolute economy of motion, hitting the man's weapon arm at the wrist and driving him back into the wall with a single controlled strike. The gun hit the floor and skidded. Tai-yang was through the emergency door to the left before it stopped sliding, cutting around the other side of the floor. The 2 men from the 3rd car came up the stairwell from below, and the corridor became a contained, rapid sequence of controlled violence that Zara had witnessed before, but never from inside, never with her own heart rate involved. She pressed flat against the wall as Jinwoo stepped in front of her. Not dramatically, just immediately, his body between her and the corridor with the automatic certainty of someone who made decisions with their body before their mind caught up to them. She felt his back against her shoulder, and she felt him assess the room in one scan, and she understood in that moment that whatever he was in the world, whoever he had built himself into, this was also true. He would put himself between her and harm without a second thought. The second of Adizi's security came around the far corner fast, and Jinwoo moved forward to meet him with a speed that was genuinely startling, closing the distance before the man expected it, deflecting the strike and returning one that dropped him against the wall. He stood over him, breathing controlled, and looked back at Zara with an expression that said, "Are you okay?" And she nodded, and he turned back to the corridor. 30 seconds of coordinated violence, then silence, sudden and total. Hyun-soo walked the length of the corridor like he was walking to a board meeting. He adjusted his collar. He knocked on the suite door at the end. A long pause. The door opened. Adaze was exactly as Zara remembered. Elegant, composed, wearing a silk blouse at 5 in the morning because she had never needed time to prepare herself. She looked past Hyun-soo and Jinwoo and found Zara at the end of the group, and what moved across her face was not guilt. It was something that was almost extraordinarily respect. "You made a better move than I expected," Adaze said. "You underestimated me," Zara said, stepping forward. "That was yours to own, not mine." They went into the suite, and what followed was not a quick conversation. Adaze was too intelligent to perform innocence and too self-contained to break under pressure, but Hyun-soo was patient in a way that operated on geological time. He could wait longer than anyone else in the room, and he always did. And eventually people said what they had been holding simply because the silence became heavier than the secret. What came out over the next 90 minutes was 3 years of the Yoon Network's architecture. The way they had targeted Hyun-soo and Jinwoo's operation from the inside, finding weak points and human vulnerabilities, using desperate people as instruments. Zara had not been the first. She was, Adaze admitted without inflection, simply the most precisely targeted because her vulnerability, a dying mother, a real one, a genuine medical emergency with documented costs, was the kind that created unwavering motivation. Desperate people with nothing to lose are reliable. That was the calculus. "Your mother is real," Adaze said, looking at Zara. "The account was real. I did not invent the crisis." "But you found me because of it," Zara said. "Yes. And the money I transferred would have come to your mother's account." She held Zara's gaze. "Partially." "My mother's life," Zara said, and the cold, precise thing in her voice cleared the room of everything else, "is not a partial." Adaze looked at her for a long moment, then she looked away. By 6:30 in the morning, the suite was secured. Adaze's people were in the hands of contacts that Hyun-soo trusted to be thorough and discreet, and the question of what happened to Adaze herself, given what she knew and who she could access and how much leverage her information held, was being handled in a room that Zara was not in. She had been asked with surprising gentleness to wait outside. She sat on the hotel stairwell steps with her back against the wall and her knees pulled up, and let herself finally feel the exhaustion that had been waiting patiently behind the adrenaline for the last 4 hours. The stairwell was very quiet. Seoul was beginning to come alive outside the walls. She could hear it distantly, the city shifting from night into early morning. The door opened. Jinwoo came through it and sat down beside her, and he had taken off his suit jacket at some point during the last hour. The red and black dragon tattoo covered his entire left forearm, the dragon's claws wrapping across his hand, vivid and detailed in the stairwell light. He said nothing. He held out a bottle of water. She took it. "Is it over?" "The immediate thing is over." He watched her drink. "Hyun-soo is handling the transfer to your mother's account directly. No intermediaries. He'll move it himself." A pause. "It should land today." She pressed the back of her hand against her mouth and breathed through what that meant, what it actually meant. The surgery, the ongoing treatment, her mother not being a statistic in someone else's operational calculus. And the gratitude was so large it had no clean way out of her, and she simply sat with it until it settled. "Thank you," she said finally. "Don't," he said, and he said it with enough warmth that it didn't sound like a rejection. "You don't owe gratitude for this. You owe yourself something for surviving it." She looked at him. He was looking at the stairs below, his profile open and serious, and she understood that there were men in the world who performed sensitivity, and men who simply had it the way they had a heartbeat. And Jinwoo was the second kind. and that was a more frightening quality than anything she had seen him do in the corridor 20 minutes ago. "I need to know something," she said. "Ask. What happens to me now?" She kept her voice even. "I entered your lives as an operation. I took from you. I lied by omission to both of you for 8 weeks. What does that mean? For me, in the context of who you are and what you do to people who operate against you." He was quiet for a moment. He turned his head and looked at her fully. "You want me to tell you whether you're safe?" "Yes." "You were always safe," he said. "From the moment I saw you in that restaurant, you were safe from me." "That's not a small thing, Zara. I don't extend that to very many people, and I don't take it back once I've given it." He held her gaze. "And Hyunsoo..." He paused. "Hyunsoo is more complicated, but I know him better than anyone alive. He is angry. Not at you. At the situation. At a Daisy and the network, and whoever thought it was acceptable to use a woman's dying mother as a mechanism." His jaw tightened. "But you are not in danger from either of us. You never were. I think some part of you knew that." She was quiet for a moment. "Some part of me did," she admitted. "That's why you stayed," he said. "All those weeks. You could have run earlier. You had enough to run on. But you stayed." She looked at her hands in her lap. He was right, and she had not let herself know he was right until this moment. Sitting in a hotel stairwell at 6:30 in the morning with the operation finished and the exhaustion absolute. She had stayed because of 2 men who came to a restaurant and looked at her like she was a complete person and not an access point. And she had told herself it was operational, and she had known it was not. "I'm going home," she said. "My mother needs me there." "I know." He did not argue it. "When she's better?" She looked at him. He met her eyes and did not look away and did not qualify the question. "I don't know yet," she said. He nodded. "Okay." And he meant it. The acceptance was real, not performance. He reached across and covered her hands with his and held them steady for a moment, and she felt the warmth of it move all the way up her arms. The stairwell door opened and Hyunsoo stepped through. He assessed the scene in one sweep and remained standing, of course, and looked at Zara with his precise, unreadable expression. "Transfer confirmed," he said. "Your mother will have everything she needs by morning her time." Zara closed her eyes for 1 full second. When she opened them, Hyunsoo was still watching her, and the thing behind his eyes was not cold at all. It was careful. The way things that run very hot are sometimes careful about how they show themselves. He sat down on the step above her, not beside her, slightly above, which was completely and entirely him, and the 3 of them sat in a hotel stairwell, while Seoul came alive outside, and the rain finally stopped, and no one said anything for a while. And it was the most honest moment Zara had spent with another human being in longer than she could measure. She flew to Accra 4 days later. Those 4 days existed in a suspended reality she could not quite name. Still in the apartment in Mapugu, her bag half packed, and the succulent on the windowsill, her body in Seoul, and her mind already somewhere over the Indian Ocean heading home. Hyunsoo sent a car on the 2nd day and took her to dinner at a restaurant that made Garrick look casual, and they sat across from each other in the quiet, and he asked her about her mother, and she told him everything. The diagnosis, the timeline, the phone calls that had held her together across 6,000 kilometers. And he listened with his full and complete attention, not interrupting once. And when she finished, he was quiet for a moment, and then he said, "She raised a remarkable person." She looked at her hands. "She raised someone who became a thief. She raised someone who crossed the world for her," he said. "The method is circumstance. The love is character." He held her gaze steadily. "Those are not the same thing. Don't let anyone, including yourself, confuse them." She looked at him across the table. In the low light, and the phoenix tattoo moved when he breathed, and she thought, in a different world, in a world where I had walked into this city honestly, what would this be? What would these months have been if I had simply been Zara? Just Zara, with nothing to hide and nothing to run. "Thank you," she said. For the money. Don't thank me for the money, he said. Thank me for dinner. She laughed. It surprised both of them, a real, full sound that she hadn't heard from herself in weeks. And something shifted in his face, something that wasn't quite a smile, but was the terrain immediately adjacent to one. And she thought, there it is. There is the man under the calculation. Jin-woo took her to Namsan on the third night. The path through the trees lit gold, and the city spread below them like every promise Seoul had ever made about itself. And he walked with his hands in his pockets, and her hand tucked into the crook of his arm that she had not planned and he had not asked for. It had simply happened the way gravity happens, because of the physics of two people in close proximity who have already decided something about each other. I should have asked you better questions, he said at one point. You asked fine questions, she said. I just couldn't answer them. I knew something was wrong, he said. I don't mean the operation. I mean... He stopped, looking at the city below. You had a weight on you, from the first night. I could see it and I didn't press on it because it wasn't my place and I didn't want to push you away. He glanced at her. I should have pushed anyway. Maybe if I had, you could have told me something. Maybe it would have gone differently. Or maybe I would have run, she said. Or that, he agreed. She looked at the city. The lights of Seoul blurred slightly in the aftermath of the rain, beautiful and enormous and completely indifferent to any particular life being lived inside it. She thought about how she had arrived here looking at it as a map and was leaving it as something she did not have a word for yet. What are you thinking? He asked. That I came here to do one specific thing, she said, and I somehow ended up doing every other thing instead. He turned toward her then. Both of them stopped on the path, the city behind him and his dark eyes on her face. And he said, the thing about this is... He paused, searching for words, which she had learned was rare for him. I don't know what to do with it either. I'm not someone who does this, feels like this. I don't know what to do with it on a regular Tuesday, let alone right now. Neither do I, she said. Good, he said. Then we're both starting from the beginning. That seems fair. And he looked at her with that complete, unguarded warmth that had been hitting her in the chest since the first Friday he walked into Garrick, and she rose up on her toes and kissed him once, briefly, soft and certain, and when she came back down his eyes were closed for exactly one more second before he opened them. He said nothing. He put his arm around her shoulders and she tucked into his side, and they stood on Namsan looking at Seoul, together in the dark. The morning she left, Hyun-soo came to the airport. He stood in the departures hall in his all-black suit, and his platinum hair and the phoenix tattoo climbing his neck, and he looked like Seoul had condensed itself into a person. And he handed her a small card with a number on it, and looked at her with those gold-brown eyes and said, Call it when you're ready to come back. I may not come back, she said. I know. He did not flinch from it. Call it anyway. She took the card. Jin-woo was at the gate when she arrived. She didn't know how he'd gotten past the barriers, and she made a conscious decision not to ask. He was sitting in one of the hard plastic chairs with his elbows on his knees, and when he looked up, the directness of his expression moved through her clean and certain as light. He stood. The dragon's claws were visible across the back of his left hand, and he looked at her the way he always had, like she was exactly who she was, and that was precisely enough. I didn't want to say goodbye at the restaurant, he said. That's where this started. Felt wrong to end it there. It didn't end there, she said. Nothing ended. He looked at her for a moment. Come back, he said. Simply. Completely. Jin-woo? Come back because this city has more to show you when you're not running an operation through it. Come back because you've never had fish cake soup sitting down. Come back because... He stopped. His jaw worked once. Come back because I will be here. The boarding call came over the speakers, and people moved around them, and she was a point of stillness in the middle of all of it, looking at him. I'll call, she said. I know you will. She turned. She had walked 4 steps when he said her name, just once, the way he always did, like it was the whole sentence. And she paused without turning around. Your mother, he said. Tell her she raised someone extraordinary. She kept walking. She had to. She went through the gate and down the corridor and onto the plane and sat in her seat and opened her hand and looked at the small card with one number and nothing else, and she held it there for 12 hours over dark ocean. Accra hit her like coming back to herself. The warm weight of the air, the colour of the light, entirely different from Seoul's silver precision, the sound of her language moving around her like water. She took a taxi directly to the hospital and walked down the corridor and pushed open the door, and her mother looked up from the hospital bed with eyes that were tired and absolutely luminous. And Zara crossed the room in 4 steps and knelt beside the bed and put her forehead against her mother's hand and breathed for the first time in 3 months as though breathing were allowed. "I'm here, Mommy," she said. "It's handled. You're going to be okay." Her mother's hand moved through her hair, slow and certain and complete. "Tell me," her mother said softly. "Tell me everything." So Zara did, all of it. The folder and the flight and Garrick and Hyunsu's gold brown eyes, and Jinwoo's laugh in the restaurant and the operation and the warehouse and the hotel corridor and the stairwell, and Namsan and the airport and a small card with one number on it that she was still carrying in the front pocket of her jacket. She talked for a long time and her mother listened without interrupting once, which was how Zara knew she was truly listening, because her mother was not a woman who stayed quiet easily. When she finished, her mother was quiet for a moment. Then, 2 of them. "Yes. And you don't know which one?" "I don't know what any of it is yet," Zara said. "I don't know what it can be." Her mother looked at her with the expression she had been perfecting for 29 years, the one that communicated that she understood everything her daughter was saying, and also everything her daughter was not. "Your heart knows," she said simply. "You just haven't asked it a direct question yet." She found the succulent on the 3rd day, packed in her bag without memory of packing it. She set it on her mother's hospital windowsill and said nothing about it, but her mother looked at it and then looked at Zara with the particular expression of a woman who has raised someone thoroughly and knows the story behind every item they carry. "Someone gave you this," her mother said. "It's a plant," Zara said. "Someone gave you this," her mother said again, with the serenity of someone who will not be argued with today. Zara looked out the window. The Accra afternoon was gold and unhurried. "It's a long story." "I have time," her mother said, and she settled back against her pillow. "The doctor says I have time now." On the 41st day, Zara picked up her phone and looked at the card for a long time. Then she typed a message to Hyunsu's number. "She's going to be okay." Z. His reply came in 6 minutes. "I know. I've been getting updates. Come back when you're ready." She stared at the screen. "You've been getting updates," she typed. "Did you think I wouldn't?" She put the phone down and picked up Jinwoo's number. She had learned it without meaning to, the same way she had learned everything about him without meaning to, and typed, "Fish cake soup. Sitting down. When I get back." His reply took 45 seconds. "I'll find us a table. Take your time. I'm not going anywhere." She sat with both phones and thought about what it meant to be looked for by people who already knew where you'd gone. She thought about gold brown eyes that saw everything, and dark eyes that asked for nothing, and 2 men who had every reason to let her go and had not. She thought about Seoul in the rain, about amber light and a warehouse and a stairwell and Namsan and the city spread below them like a promise. Her mother, from the bed. "When do you go back?" Zara looked up. Her mother was watching her with soft and knowing eyes. "I know my daughter," she said. "You have the look of someone who left something behind." "I left 2 things behind," Zara said. Her mother was quiet for a moment. Then, "Are they worth going back for?" Zara thought about being seen, not caught, not used, not aimed. Seen, for exactly who she was, by 2 men who had every reason to look away, and didn't. She thought about the most honest version of herself that she had ever been with another person, sitting in a hotel stairwell at dawn, saying, "I stole from you," and being answered with, "We fix this." "Yes," she said. Her mother reached out and took her hand. "Then go," she said. "When I'm strong enough not to need you beside me every single day. Go. I did not raise you to sit still at the edge of your own life waiting for permission. I raised you to move. Mom, I raised you to move, her mother said again, and her grip was stronger than it had been in months. So go, and when you come back to me, and you will always come back to me, come back with the whole story. Zara looked at her mother for a long time. Then she leaned forward and pressed her forehead against hers and stayed there in that stillness, the particular stillness of two people who know each other all the way down, and breathed. 2 weeks later, she landed in Seoul. The rain met her at the glass doors of the arrivals hall, Seoul's precise and indifferent rain, falling in thin silver lines, exactly as she remembered it. She stood at the doors with her bag on her shoulder and the succulent tucked into the front pocket of her carry-on, back where it belonged, because some things you don't leave behind twice. She pushed through the doors and walked out into the rain and let it fall on her, and she did not hurry, and she did not pull up a collar, and she did not treat it as an inconvenience. She just stood in it for one moment and breathed Seoul in. The cold precision of it, the density of the city noise, the neon already flickering in the grey afternoon. And she let it recognize her. Her phone buzzed. Jinwoo, I can see you from the car. You look like someone who belongs here. She looked up. Across the road, a navy car was parked with the window down, and she could see him. Dark hair, broad shoulders, something easy and warm in the line of his face. And he lifted his hand once in acknowledgement, and she felt it in her chest like a bell struck. She did not move toward the car immediately. She just stood in the rain and breathed and let the moment be exactly what it was. A woman standing in a city that had taken everything from her and given it back in a different shape, in a shape she had not expected and could not yet name but recognized, somewhere below the place where names live, as hers. Her phone buzzed again. Hyunsu. Welcome back. Zara. 3 words. No location. No explanation. Just the 3 words that said everything that a man like him allowed himself to say, which meant they said everything. She put both phones in her pocket. She picked up her bag. She took one more breath of Seoul's rain-cold air. And then she walked toward the car, not running, not rushing, just moving forward the way her mother had raised her to do. Toward whatever came next. Toward 2 men who had looked at her clearly and not looked away. Toward a city that was not hers and had somehow, stubbornly, beautifully, become something she was choosing. The car door opened. She got in. Seoul closed around her, cold and precise and glittering in the rain, and it did not care about her at all. But they did. And for Zara, who had crossed the world alone with a plan and come back with something she had not planned for, something warmer and more complicated, and more real than anything she had carefully arranged. That was everything. If you are still here, wherever you are, whatever hour it is, whatever city is outside your window, drop it in the comments right now. Because this story about a woman who only meant to survive, who reached for what she needed and somewhere along the way found something she never budgeted for, has already traveled further than she ever ran. And if something in Zara's fight found you, if the warehouse, or the stairwell, or Namsan, or the moment she walked back through those arrival doors felt like something you have felt before or are feeling right now, then you already know this story is not finished. Neither is she. Neither, I think, are you. Subscribe. Share this with the person in your life who needs to be reminded that being truly seen is possible, that it can find you in a restaurant in a city that is not yours, when you are just trying to make it from one day to the next. Like this video. And now, you already know where we're going next.